Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Just a reminder, if the public wishes to speak tonight during community comment, they need to fill out a speaker form found at the table in the lobby. Prior to that, do some quick introductions for folks up here at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Pilcher Hayek, Eastham Williams. To my left, Vice President Malone and Directors Clausen and Finch, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. Our first item on our agenda is our education showcase, and Kristen is going to introduce our guests today.
Good evening, everybody. Excuse me. Tonight we have the pleasure to be joined by second grade student Aaliyah Crawford. And to introduce her, we have Kirkwood Elementary Principal Renee Pearson and second grade teacher Peyton Swift.
Evening. We are super excited to be here and honored to have Aaliyah as one of our Kirkwood scholars. So I'm Renee Pearson, principal at Kirkwood Elementary. Peyton Swift is one of our amazing second grade teachers. I will let her speak just for a moment about kind of what brought this amazing opportunity for our kids to learn about some pretty cool Black history facts and people to fruition.
Like Renee said, my name is Peyton Swift, and I am Aaliyah's second grade teacher. In October, she actually asked me if she could research different Black individuals that we don't hear about a ton. And I said, go for it. So she actually researched 7 different people and shared about 2 people a week. And actually, she inspired some of our classmates to share about other topics as well. I know I learned a lot from her, so I'm excited for you to hear about her tonight.
She's got a slide set that she created, so she's chosen some things to share tonight about that. Leah, do you want to hold the microphone? Does that feel good? Okay.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah Renee Crawford, and I'm a second grader at Kirkwood Elementary. In November, I started a project on Black history to show my class during Black History Month. So now I want everyone to know about Black history. It's not just a month, it's every day. I also inspired classmates to do their own presentations. 2 people researched singers. One did one about Black history, and one did one about NASA. And thank you to my teacher, Miss Swift, for letting me share. I'm now going to share 2 people with you. The first one is Raven Wilkins. Raven is the first Black ballerina to dance with an American company. She worked very hard so all Black ballerinas, including Misty Copeland, could dance. Raven went through many hard obstacles, including the KKK, but she didn't give up. She danced on for 50 years. Eventually, Misty Copeland and Raven Wilkinson stood on stage together. I'm now going to share the next one. His name is Garrett Morgan. This amazing man invented many things that we use today. The gas mask and the traffic light are his most famous. Gas masks are used when firefighters enter an explosion to help them breathe safely. We use traffic lights every day to keep cars going the right way. If Garrett hadn't invented them, we would have a lot of crashes. Thank you for listening today, and it was an honor to do this.
Aaliyah's fan club has joined us as well, so some other Kirkwood scholars.
All right, that was fantastic. Thank you. That takes us to our community comment. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Please remember that you are making comments in a public meeting, and as such, it is expected that members of the public and the board will address each other with civility and respect. The orderly process of the board meeting will not be interfered with or disrupted by public comment. If comments by the speaker or others become disruptive, the individual causing the disruption may be asked to leave the board meeting. With that, first up, we have Casey Meyer.
Hi, my name is Casey Meyer. I've had kids in the Iowa City School District for 8 years when my first son began kindergarten. I now have 2 kids at Weber Elementary and 1 at Northwest Junior High. So I just wanted to start off by thanking all the members of the school board for your service to the community. Time's a precious commodity, and I thank you for using yours toward the betterment of our schools. And from watching previous board meetings, it's clear that you're engaged and that you care about what's happening in the district. So thank you for that. The reason I'm here today is because I'm concerned about the chaotic and seemingly toxic environments that have personally affected my kids in their schools at Weber and Northwest, and which appear to be pervasive in schools across the district. I know there are many complicated facets that feed into our school environments, many of which are well-intentioned to create an inclusive and equitable environment. However, I'm beginning to wonder if some of the changes that have been made over the past 8 years are having their intended effect. During the 2015, 2016 through 2017, 2018 school years, there was a steep escalation of violent and disrespectful behaviors at Northwest Junior High, which I would like to mention precedes both the pandemic and the hiring of Elizabeth Bruning as principal. If I'm remembering correctly, at least 7 teachers quit, one of whom walked out in the middle of the school day. This was followed by 1 year of reprieve when the new administration enforced the rules with the consequences as written by the district's disciplinary policy. But then as far as I understand what happened, and this is confusing to me, Northwest, along with other schools in the district, started to repeatedly get into trouble because of the demographic breakdown of their major referrals. The reason this is confusing to me is because major referrals comprise bringing a weapon to school, drugs at school, and committing an act of violence at school, none of which are subjective offenses. School administrators and teachers now almost universally seem hesitant to enforce the disciplinary policy as written. Likewise, they also seem to have the impression that they are not to discipline for cell phone use, for language, even if the student is cursing at the teacher, skipping class, or for disruptive behavior in the classroom. I'm just wondering how so many of our district employees across multiple schools have come to the same conclusions regarding restrictions on disciplinary action, which are seemingly in contradiction to written policy. I would be interested in hearing an answer to this question following a third-party investigation. If we fast forward to the current school year, where fights at Northwest are still occurring almost daily, from my standpoint, there appeared to be little, if any, support from district administrators. But then, one of those fights received negative publicity, and the district reacted quickly by reassigning several support staff to Northwest. I feel frustrated about this because the district has had the opportunity for many years to be proactive in its support for this long-term chronic problem at Northwest, but it took negative publicity to elicit a response. Our families in the unique situation have seen nearly the exact same circumstances play out at 2 different schools. Weber is also struggling with the same disciplinary issues as Northwest, and like Northwest, there appears to be little, if any, support from the district. Weber is the largest elementary school in the district and growing because of continual residential development. Yet Weber has only 1 counselor and 1 student family advocate. I'm aware that Weber has a vice principal while other elementary schools have none. But frankly, this position has been ineffective in improving the chaotic environment. In my opinion, that money would be better spent on mental health support staff. Weber has also experienced an unusual turnover.
Thank you, Casey. That's your time.
Okay.
Any further comments, you can put them in writing and send an email to the board if you'd like.
Okay, I think I already did. Have you guys seen them?
Yep.
Or you're probably not allowed to answer.
Thank you. All right. Next up, Noah.
Hello, Noah here. So last meeting, the meeting was started off with, the public comment was started off by a pair of young women coming here to talk about their experience with the women's tennis coach and how they assaulted and touched the young tennis players, and yet the district still has that person hired as their coach. I just want to know how the hell that happens and how like y'all can like keep that up. Like that's completely unacceptable. That is completely just straight up wrong, plainly completely wrong, that people have to stop playing a sport that they love because their coach abused them, and the district has not supported the people who gave their testimony and talked about their abuse and still keeps their abuser hired. That's just incredibly disgusting, and y'all need to do something about that now, immediately. That's just so wrong. I hope you can see how wrong that is. I mean, that is plainly and obviously wrong to everyone in this room. They should be able to recognize that that is wrong. The district would still keep that person hired and still have that person coaching, even though people have quit the team because of that person as the coach, because they were abused by that person, and the district still keeps them hired. That is incredibly disturbing, and I'm just going to encourage y'all as a board to do something about that immediately. Like, this is an immediate problem that needs to be solved, like right now, pretty much. Obviously, I'm not talking about like right now this instant, but I mean, you could put forward putting this on a special meeting, having something about the board, could do something about it right now. But I'm just gonna encourage y'all to, in the near future, do something about this. I'm also going to talk about the hybrid. I understand that y'all have agreed to go with the hybrid and to upgrade this room, but the $200,000 or $200K figure is ridiculous. That is an absurdly high figure that you could get. Please get other bids that are not ridiculously high, because that is not responsible. Yes, you do need to upgrade this, but that is a ridiculous amount to pay for upgrading this room. You could do that for much cheaper. Thank you.
That is all we have for community comment tonight, so we can move into agenda approval. And I have one change before we approve the agenda. We are going to take item 10 off the consent and bring it back on the May 10th meeting. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that one change.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda minus item 10.
Second.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That brings us to our consent agenda. Any questions from directors after reviewing the bills that they'd like to address? A lot of head shaking no. Any other items to pull from consent from directors? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval of consent agenda minus item 10.
I second. Sorry.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, and that brings us to some public hearings. First up is Garner Elementary, Phase 3.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Garner Elementary Wall Panel Phase 3 replacement project. The Board of Directors set the date for the public hearing, on April 12, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 13, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. April 28, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 13th, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to the second one, which is the Hoover Annex demo and grading project.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Hoover Annex demo and grading project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 12, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 13, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. May 12, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 13, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that hearing and move on to our last one, the Weber Elementary bus loop.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Weber Elementary bus loop project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 12, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 13, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 3 p.m. April 28, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 13, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to our policy review section. We did have our P&G meeting earlier tonight, and we ran through the 600s through the 900s. To be fair, there's not a lot of changes in the 7s, 8s, and 9s. That was kind of our first time run through, so it makes it go rather quickly. I'm just going to make a couple notes on the 600s because it is the one that we will take action on, as it is our second reading on it. There were just a couple of typos in there. I'm just going to make a note of it now so we can still adopt it, I think, when we take our vote. But I wanted to have it on the record that these are being addressed, and it's in 603.8 R1, just kind of cleaning up a sentence that didn't make a lot of sense. And then they were adding a word in 606.2. There was a word missing in a sentence. So there's two changes that are not reflected in this attachment. But when we get down to taking action on it, I want to make sure we reflect those changes. Were there any other thoughts from other directors as they went through there? All right. We can kind of bundle this all together maybe and run 7 through the 9s. Again, there was just a handful of small edits from the P&G committee. Nothing substantive, I don't think. So I don't know if there's anything anybody else wanted to have P&G take another look at before we do our second reading on them.
Sean, this is a little awkward, so I'll try to be somewhat organized. We've received communications since the last meeting and at the last meeting regarding things that students have brought to our attention about conduct that they received that they don't find to be appropriate. I would like us to address those concerns, and one of the ways to do that, in my view anyway, may be to look at our policies and procedures to see if they're adequate under the circumstances that the students have described. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place in the agenda to bring this up. I guess the other option is to do it under agenda setting, but I wanted to make mention of it, or to bring it up now and see if we can agree to how to proceed.
I think a fair point to start is looking at our policy, make sure that, we're covering, what we need to cover. We were just kind of discussing what our next P&G meeting was going to be, and hopefully very brief as we run through these 6 through 9s, and then start the cycle over and kind of what we were going to be targeting at. So I think we can kind of take the note to review that specifically. I would think kind of the things you're mentioning would sort of fit in a couple different places, but you know, we have a students, right, section and or series, and then there's employees one too, and then also just the program itself. So I think there could be touches on it in a lot of different places. So we can certainly take that as a committee and try and figure out where something like that should reside or not. And if the committee's struggling with that, right, we could certainly have the full board have a conversation in the future about it and try and figure out how to put that into place. So I'm trying to make sure I have a little note here so I don't forget it later, but my pen is dying on me. All right. So while I'm scribbling down notes, were there any other questions on these policies? Thank you. All right. There's no further questions on that. We can skip on down to our discussion items. And first up is our equity update. And who's going to kick us off?
Go ahead, sir. Good evening. Tonight, the privilege is mine to give our equity update and to speak with you about the equity evaluation standard. And the majority of my time tonight, I'm going to talk about Portrait of an Educator. But as a reminder of where we were on this and how we've gotten here is last summer, Brady, Eric, Monique, and some others were working with a small group of our teachers about how do we best incorporate this standard. And there were some thoughts of that were maybe some foundational work we needed to do before that. And last summer, also the state went ahead and implemented a new standard for our leaders around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we've talked a lot about how do we do professional development around our leaders first, both in that standard and how we roll that out to our buildings. We got into the school year, an opportunity came up for us to do Portrait of an Educator, and after some conversation, we really liked going this route because it allowed us to establish what it means to be an educator in the Iowa City Community School District. And we felt that it could, we didn't want to predetermine what that would look like, that it could start really us on this path about maybe revising how we go about evaluating and what standards we hold our teachers to. So that's how we got here. And tonight, I'm proud to give you all a first look at really what our Portrait of an Educator looks like here in Iowa City. And overall, an Iowa City professional is a relationship builder. I don't think that would be a surprise to any of us in education that we would see as a foundation, but that's what we heard internally. And just like we did with Portrait of a Graduate, we identified some key concepts. And you'll see the four there that our team centered around. Educators are reflective, they're empathetic, they're collaborative, and they're culturally responsive. And so some of the same conversations that we've had, the administration and the board, we've seen that work now extended to what our larger group of educators, all administrators, teachers, and support staff have really centered around as what they think it looks like to be an educator here in Iowa City. This is exciting. We just got this back from our consultants in the last couple of weeks. And so Brady and I haven't even had a chance to sit down and go over this. We kind of thought about from a theoretical global standpoint what the next steps would be to bring that team back together and then continue these conversations. But that's where we are tonight. And so we're really proud to bring this forward as a draft, especially looking at those four key concepts and focusing on that last one of culturally responsive educators and what that means to us in the classrooms. And so while we're not all the way there of where the goal is on this equity standard, we believe it is a step in the right direction as we do this work, both for administrators and now looking at educators overall. I will tell you that as we move forward and we have these conversations, we're going to have to think strategically about how we incorporate this into our evaluation system, because under the state of Iowa, doing some more research this year, Iowa does not allow you to evaluate probationary teachers within their first 3 years on any standards that are not articulated by the state. So we can't add a separate standard to that evaluation system. But what this does is it gives us a framework and a vision to utilize as we train administrators and work with our teachers about what does it mean and what are we going to look for what do those look for? How do those incorporate and work with the standards that are already there? And how do we make sure that in those criteria, these 4 concepts are really reflected in that work that we do through the evaluation process? That's kind of a very broad overview of where we've been and this going along that same trajectory and knowing now that we need to go back to that work group. That's one of the things, and Brady, I can let Brady comment as well, that came out of our Portrait of an Educator team. The last meeting, they're like, okay, what's next? Like, where do we go from here? It wasn't, we're done, we want you to, let us go back to our classrooms and just do whatever they are. They're thirsty to continue this journey with us, and so that's what Brady and I need to do now is get together, how do we take it back to that work group to make sure this work continues as we look to improve these practices for our teachers. Questions on this evening?
Chase, do you think you could forward that document to us? I actually can't read that.
Okay,
from here.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's on me, and I apologize. I did not get it to Kim. I barely got it to Kristen to pull up on the screen. So
No worries.
yes, we'll get that.
Okay.
We'll get it posted on board docs for everybody to see. If Kristen scrolls down or up, Kristen would. It does say draft on the bottom, so we'll make sure we date it and put draft on there. We want to. That's one of the things we want to do is take it back to the team to make sure the wording, because it is the team's document. It's not just Chase Ramey's document or even the leadership team's document, and we need to vet it through that bigger team to make sure it is wordsmithed the right way, that it reflects everyone's feelings and thoughts on that. So we will post it, but we'll keep that draft on there so no one mistakes it as the final copy yet.
So Chase, again, not being contentious, can you talk about what your thinking is in terms of when students will begin to see some differences in their classroom environment with the adoption of these guidelines and standards?
Sure. So the one thing I didn't mention, and I don't want to steal Amy's thunder on this, although I don't think it's on the agenda tonight, is the other piece that this really, we think, works in conjunction with is the work that we're doing around high reliability schools. And as we look at rolling that out this summer and into our buildings, and that focus on that level 1 being that climate and culture, we think this fits in nicely with some of the work that we want to do at the building level. And so, Charlie, we would hope that staff members, students, that everyone in our school environment start to see the benefits of the move, not only to Portrait of an Educator and Portrait of a Graduate, but what we're doing with high reliability schools, and that we'll start to see some of that this year.
Great. I know we're not discussing high reliability schools right now, but I'm looking forward to that discussion because there's some aspects of that.
So are we. We're pretty excited about it. So.
That I think we've been really wanting to do, including the use of data to guide what's happening. Sorry.
I was just going to add in that I think it would be, we'd be remiss in saying, or it would be important to note that our educators are these things, right?
Yes.
And I think that part of what we're trying to do is make sure that we deal with inconsistencies when they happen or when we don't present as our best selves and things go wrong. And so that's the constant anchor point for us with these is how do we make sure that we commit to these practices every day? And if somebody's struggling with that, then how do we identify, hey, maybe this is a part you're struggling with and where we need to help you and try to provide some additional training. So I think I would just agree with Chase totally, right? That we would hope our students would feel that right now, that they would feel that more next year, that that's part of our continual work. And so I think that's an expectation that students and families should have and that us as educators should have for ourselves as well.
I would just say, having carefully reviewed the high reliability schools information you've given us, that was my question, and you just started to address it, is how it's going to be integrated, because it's laid out so clearly, and so it'll be good for the board to see how you take this and show us exactly where it goes in that process.
I'm just going to add a little bit more because my excitement around high reliability.
I'm excited about it too.
It's high, but in the first couple of indicators in level 1, 1.1 and 1.2, it really talks about a safe and supportive culture, right? And as I think about the professional development that we've had in the district over the last couple of years, certainly we've been focused on culturally responsive teaching, the cultural proficiency continuum, the professional development and that was Laura Gray's department and Laura doing that professional development, then segueing into Laura Daly's department and her work and their work. You know, we focus a lot on student SEL, but we also focus on adult SEL. And when you think about their social emotional learning or where they're at,
as a professional in their personal lives. We don't discount that. I mean, that is part of our professional development. So I feel like all of this fits nicely together. This, to me, is just saying what we already truly know and believe about our educators, and it's putting it on paper, it's naming it, and so it's not one standing document that I think is supporting the work. I think it's all very nicely integrated.
And perhaps more, this has more of an equity focus, so, which is important.
The other thing, I come back, Charlie, to your question is, I think everything we've shared about when the students would hopefully see that, I think is right on. In terms of when we might actually see a change to our evaluation tool, I think that's a little bit more of it's a more difficult question. I don't have that answer for you. I mean, we try to be collaborative. Of course, several years ago when the state took evaluation out of the negotiation process, that kind of made it more complicated because we had a better system of how we would make those changes and have those conversations. And not that we're not still collaborative, it's just now it's one more kind of process we need to bring people around the table to. And so it continues to be part of that work, but I don't have a great timeline of how we are going to best implement it into a change in the evaluation tool. Number one, because we've got to figure out how we do it for all of our educators when we know we can't change the standards that we evaluate our probationary teachers on those first 3 years in the profession.
But giving them feedback and things like that, that's provided in the high reliability schools framework. Yeah. So there is a lot of new, not necessarily new to our district. The HRS framework provides that kind of like making sure we're watching our teachers and our teachers are watching each other and helping each other to make sure they're doing this. So I agree, I have a lot of confidence in that, but this is nice because what you did is you made it more applicable to our district's, our mission, right?
Yep, yes.
Anything else from directors on this? All right.
Great. I just, again, like to thank Brady and all of our teachers for all their collaboration and work on this.
For doing that work.
All right. Move to our next discussion item, our health and safety update.
Yep. Hi again. It's pretty brief this evening. Maybe the news isn't quite as great, but as we look at our COVID dashboard, we continue to see some numbers climb. Krista and I were actually talking between policy and governance meeting and our regular board meeting here about how it jumped up at the end of the day here with where our student case count was to where we updated the dashboard this afternoon, and then the same thing with staff. And so we are seeing some increased cases in our school buildings right now, hence the reminder you saw from us last week. And appreciate the suggestion to do that and kind of just increase some awareness for folks again is more routine for people not wearing masks and doing some of those things that it's also not totally unexpected that we would see some of this, but at the same time we want people to take whatever measures they feel necessary at this point, since we do remain in that community level of low that hasn't shifted yet. We wouldn't be surprised if that does to medium, but remember that most of our health and safety protocols at that point wouldn't change either. That was the big shift for us from the high to the medium, not from the medium to the low. And I think I hit the high points there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I think maybe the one other thing I would think about is just subs in our buildings again has been a little tough. The last couple of weeks we're seeing higher absentee rates for staff for different reasons. That generally trends up for the district a little bit in the spring, but then you put, again, COVID on top of that with some folks being out. That's created some different challenges in our school buildings for subs and filling positions and making sure that everything's covered every day. So folks like Renee trying to put that puzzle together every day in their building is difficult right now, and so we sure appreciate the work they're doing. And we've tried to continue to entertain solutions that we had presented to you earlier here in the winter about trying to fill some of those needs as we can.
I have something to say about it. So I, as a board member, and I didn't go through the what were hopefully the worst times of figuring out how to navigate this, and our board that was here did a wonderful job, in my opinion. I do think it is important to just remind our community that we have kids that don't qualify for vaccinations, and that can't be forgotten for a minute. So as much as we want to proceed less cautiously. As a school district, we of all people have to be the most cautious. So I would say to the community that when possible, err on the side of caution. If there's some kind of school gathering where you can be more cautious about it, then do it. And that also, we have to, in my opinion, encourage our kids to wear masks, not for them, but for everyone around them. Just making sure we keep on understanding that we're protecting others from us. It's not just a right to protect yourself. So I just want to make sure we continue to be mindful of it, because this is we have another month or something of school, a little bit more than that. Yeah. So, and then we'll be outside more, and let's just really try to encourage caution till we can get these kids through the end of the school year.
Thanks, Maka.
I was just going to throw on that, you know, I think it was our last health and safety update, we were talking about health and safety being a bigger thing, and we're going to get to it when we come to agenda setting, that we are having a work session, you know, ahead of our next board meeting to talk about some of the mental health struggles that we're all seeing. So I just wanted to highlight that now, because it is part of our health and safety of our district that we need to keep an eye on. Any other comments on that item? All right, let's move into our action items. First up are those 600 series, and just for the record, those edits are in 603.8R1 and 606.2. So you don't have to say it again when we make a motion, but were there any other comments on the policies? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve with those edits.
I move that we approve the 600 series with those edits.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, our next action item is proposal to use sales tax revenues for a project at City High. I don't know if there's any context that somebody needs to provide the board. Les?
If you recall, the Iowa legislature extended the ability of schools to use the sales tax till 2051 back in 2019. But one of the provisions that they threw in on the side is that any external athletic facility needed to have prior approval before you could spend any dollars on that project, whether not even the design dollars. And so you can see it's a chicken and egg situation, which comes first, because if you don't know what the project is, you don't know what the costs are, how can you put a proposal out to anybody to know what to do, right? And so what you are able to do, though, is use PEPL dollars for some of the design work to at least figure out where you're at with the project. And so that's what Jeff and his team have done with those tennis courts at City High to figure out how we got to that cost number that is included in there. It's not a shot in the dark. It's based upon some preliminary design work. And so this is just the resolution to put this, to put the public hearing on the next board meeting. You'll hold a public hearing, and then the process is that a community member has 15 days to call for a petition on this. We're not expecting that to happen, but they do have the opportunity. And this is really driven by the legislature acting on the Des Moines Public Schools and their relationship with Drake University and building the football stadium over there that made lots of news. So again, it's another direct hit on actions taken by schools that were reflected in legislative action. And so that's the steps we're taking here. And you know, once this passes, then Jeff and his team will be back with the actual tennis court project for you to work through the Appendix 9 process with that. So
we should expect future resolutions of this nature as we go through time? to comply with that?
Anytime we do a athletic facility project like that, it's still unclear whether that applies to change or replacing athletic turf, the AstroTurf or synthetic turf on a field, if it applies to that or not. But if you built a long corridor from your high school to the football field and connected them as one facility, you would not have to do that. That's the craziness of this law.
Okay. Any questions from directors on this? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we pass the resolution for proposal to construct tennis courts with sales tax revenues.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Our last action item is our voluntary transfer forms. We're adding an exception in there, and I don't know, I would let somebody else kind of explain it, do better than I would, so.
Yeah, so I'll start, and then Amy can fill in any details I might leave out of the form process. But the Forest View Mobile Home Park, we know that they're displacing the residents of Forest View, and so we wanted to reflect the ability for those students and families to transfer schools and create an exception on our transfer form to that end if they wanted to remain at Mann Elementary or if they wanted to continue in their feeder pattern of Southeast or City. And so what's reflected here in the agenda tonight is just an update of those forms to allow for that exception that they could use a voluntary transfer. Hard to say if many families will do that, knowing that they could be displaced widely across the district, but we certainly wanted to try to create that option if at all possible.
Any comments or questions? Chuck?
Sean, if you don't mind, I really want to commend the administration for including this exception in this transfer policy. I think this was something the residents themselves had discussed early on and are very much interested in. Again, your point about how many will be able to take advantage and or will use this or not is unclear. But the Forest View neighborhood has long been an established, very cohesive neighborhood of people, communities, community in and of itself. And I'm really happy that we're recognizing that and supporting it as they go through the business of being relocated.
Anyone else?
You know, I'll just make one comment that we had an education committee meeting or a meeting at Mann a few years ago, and they highlighted their sort of outreach program for families and how robustly successful that was, and bringing folks in, helping them with, you know, meal, and it was just this amazing, and it was right before the holidays, so it was like this sort of heartwarming example of how that school really helped support that community, and to imagine, you know, this policy can help, you know, maintain some of that cohesion. But that's probably, in all my time on the board, has been one of the most sort of inspiring examples of our schools really impacting their neighborhood community in a very positive way. So I'll just throw that in.
The last thing I might add, Sean, is just wanted to thank Jeff Fruin and his team from the city of Iowa City for reaching out to us from a timing standpoint, that they're trying to package a lot of information for these families as cohesively as possible. So this allowed us to get it on the agenda for you tonight, and it can all get communicated to the families at once with I think they're doing an event with the families on May 5th, and so this syncs up really well. So we appreciate Jeff and the city of Iowa City's communication back to us on that.
Very good. Anything else? I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we pass the voluntary transfer forms.
Second.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. Next up, our legislative update. anything to share, Matt?
Yeah, just a quick update. Those of us that were able to participate in the legislative forum last Friday heard from our local legislators that really we're kind of in a stalemate mode, still in Des Moines there around the governor's omnibus bill, which of course includes the student scholarships that we've been referring to as vouchers that would open that up. And so there is other provisions of that omnibus bill, parental bill of rights. It's in the Senate version. Some of the transparency provisions, and so all of that is kind of stalled for the time being. There's different legislators that have committed to their home-based constituencies that they won't support vouchers, but the governor continues to try to work on this proposal and try to see if the votes are there, and so until somebody blinks, I guess, in that sense, we won't exactly know where that's going to end up for this period of time, if they'll peel off some of the other components and still work through the omnibus bill that's there without that scholarship provision or not. So that's probably the major substantive update that's there and still sitting in play for us until they decide to adjourn or move on. So that was really what we had heard from the legislators last Friday and what we're just waiting on at this time.
There was no update today on the education bills either, so
yep.
It's
couldn't find anything either. I would say we did have a nice moment of being able to thank Mary and Joe for their service for a long time down in Des Moines, and thanks to Director Malone for thinking of that for us. And so that was awfully sweet. And we were able to present them with the District Shine Award, which was pretty cool. So they get to have that as a token of their service for us. So thank them very much.
We are lucky to work with legislators that are as committed to public education as the rest of us are. So I was just going to mention that it has been established that the governor is working with Republican candidates to primary Republicans who are against the vouchers. So that's pretty unprecedented. That's how strongly she feels. So she's going to do whatever she can to try to convince these more rural communities than not to pass vouchers. It's disgusting.
It's a good summation.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on that topic? All right. Last up is our agenda setting. One thing that's not on there, we are going to try and have a closed session next Tuesday on the 3rd. I assume at 5. It's probably when that's going to be. I'm seeing some head nods. But then on the 10th, as I mentioned earlier, we will have the work session, a discussion on mental health. And then we will have our regular board meeting on the 10th, where we have our student representatives and probably our last student representative update for the school year, and our ICEA update, our consent, and our general, equity update, and our regular offenders on there. So is there anything else that we need to get on there from either the admin team or directors? I want to make sure that I think the work on the work session will be the highlight of that night for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a Jen saying this is the place to say it, but the community commenter tonight reminded me, this has been on front of mind for me, because we do talk about discipline a lot, and we obviously talk about disproportionality a lot, and we've got some real concerns. But this isn't the first time I've heard that the impression people get is that we're just done with discipline. And then what I hear is we're just done with expectations. And I've heard that in numerous forums, and I just want to publicly state, if staff are getting that message, certainly not coming from me as a board member. Like, we do have to have expectations, right? It's really important. And I think we're doing kids a big disservice if we are letting these things slip. It doesn't mean we abandon relationship building, but that is a part of it. And it doesn't mean that we ignore things that we shouldn't be ignoring. And not to call all the individual instances or what happened, but when I looked at the situation that did happen at Northwest, You know, that was students beating up on another student, and that was not okay. You know, and how, you know, people can argue about if police should have been called and the way the police reacted, and I understand that. We do have to work on that. But when I saw that video of that kid getting beat up, that was wrong, right? And that we can't allow that to happen. It's not, you know, people say, oh, fights like that happen all the time. Well, that's not okay. That was like 4 kids beating up on one small kid. That was just wrong. And so I just want, you know, I don't know what we can say to get that message out there that, yeah, we are going to change our practices and we need to get better. We need to change our disproportionality. But if we flip that, and sometimes, you know, we get real deficit focused, right? We talk about all these kids who are in trouble, but what about all of our students of color who have never been suspended? I would bet that's a very high percentage. I bet that's a very high percentage of students who don't run into discipline problems. And so sometimes when we get into this deficit model, you know, I do think that people can then look at it through the deficit lens, and I just think that's the wrong way we want to go about it. I mean, if we're PBIS, you know, let's focus on the positives. What is going on for our kids that are positive? What are the things that are happening for that are good? And then for those group of kids who maybe are consistently finding themselves in our discipline situation, we do have to get better at that. We do. And it starts obviously on the proactive end, right, with relationship building and cultural responsiveness and understanding. You know, frankly, I think if we went a long ways toward eliminating things like the microaggressions and the little things that kids experience all of the time, we're going to see some of that data change pretty dramatically. But I don't want people to think, because we're working in disproportionality, that we're going to allow kids to get beat up, or we're going to allow, you know, students to truly, and I get disrespect can be very subjective.
I'm going to reel you in a little bit,
Okay.
JP,
Sorry,
because
Sean.
we are in agenda setting.
Fair.
I'm
Fair.
trying to figure out how we can put this into a conversation that we can have.
Yeah, sorry, I was
and
being
I'm
soapbox.
framing it in my head, as I just mentioned earlier, that health and safety is a bigger picture than just COVID. And I'm wondering if we can have a conversation under that kind of heading somewhat in this area, either at, you know, this meeting on the 10th or at a future meeting. I think we can work through that as a team to figure out when we can put that on there. But I think that's a place to have it, because it is a health and safety topic, in my opinion. I mean, if we want it to be a standalone thing with a different heading, that's fine too, but that's where I feel it should be. But we can't have the conversation right now.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. Thanks for reeling me in. I needed it.
Should have done it sooner, but, you know, you were on a roll.
I actually appreciate JP bringing this up, and you're steering us agenda-wise to a better place, Sean, too. Okay. So, and I think health and safety is a good
So
agenda to bring in.
I'll work with Matt and Ruthina when we meet on our agenda setting and figure out where we can kind of try and slot that in.
Right.
All right. Any other topics that we want to get on somewhere? All right. Going, gone. All right. That is all. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.